Krysten Taprell, welcome to Stay Humble podcast.
Thank you.
And what I want to start with first is about when did you the idea about setting up yourself as the therapist parent?
So what happened was, I've been a psychologist for 20 odd years now, and I work mainly with children and families. And I found that I was seeing a lot of parents who I didn't really feel like that they needed to come to therapy. Like I didn't feel like the kids needed to come to fortnightly therapy, and that's a huge stress on a family. So the idea was to give parents some little tips and tricks and some ideas and things that I know that they could just learn and do at home and not actually need to be going to a therapy session. And that's where my book came. And so it all started with the book. So the Dream Director, so helping kids with nightmares, and then decided that, okay, I'll bring the book out and then I'll start the website to try and build up an audience for the book. And it's just snowballed from there.
I was going to say you have quite an audience that I noticed the other day when obviously looking at through your social media. I mean, you have over like 100,000 followers on combined between Facebook and Instagram. Is that quite a surprise to yourself how quickly that's grown? Or
Yeah, it's been a funny journey. So I've had it for a couple of years now, 2 years, I think. And just all of a sudden things sort of just snowballed. So I managed to put up a post and it just seemed to go viral, and it's just gone from there. But it's been really amazing because I've been able to, I'm in Australia, but I'm talking to you in the UK, and I've had podcasts with people in India and Canada and all over the place. So, yeah, it has been quite amazing.
And what's the reaction been like to your posts in terms of parents reaching out to yourself or teachers or other sort of people that interact with children on a daily basis?
Look, most of the interaction I get are really positive. People just find I often get comments or messages from people saying how they find it really helpful and it's changed their views on parenting and child development and working with kids, or it just really confirms what they've been looking at and what they're trying to learn. Occasionally I get a few that are not so supportive, but the majority, people are finding it really helpful.
No, I find it very helpful what you share, and obviously try to share that a lot of the time on my own Instagram in terms of the ones that I think that could make the most difference to parents particularly, or teachers in that fact. Like I want to try and share their messages. I think they're great to pass on. And a colleague of mine wanted to ask about like how does your approach make a difference? How would you think that?
A difference, my approach as in the things that I'm sharing on Instagram and Facebook?
I think it's a bit of more towards your sort of psychological work in terms of what you do on a day-to-day basis in your job.
Yeah, okay. So psychology has changed a lot in the last 20 years too. So the way I deal with things has changed a lot. So originally when I first became a psychologist, we were still very much in the reward and punishment kind of ideas. And unfortunately, a lot of schools still are in that. And it's taken me a lot of learning to understand that it's more about attachment and relationship and connection that brings the change to behaviour and not just reward and punishment. So, I think that's the main change that people find when I'm trying to educate as well. And I work in schools a lot of the time as well. So it's really can be a bit of an uphill battle trying to explain that difference, that different approach, and just, taking away things from a child's not actually going to make their behaviour any better.
Are the people that you work with, not just necessarily children, but like teachers and parents, open to change for you? Do you feel that? Do you think people are quite open-minded? Like sort of if we talk about growth mindset, for instance, are some parents fixed mindseted where they think, oh, nothing can change, they're hardwired, there's nothing that we can do? Or do you feel that a lot of people that you speak to are sort of growth-minded where they are up, they're prepared to see a change and instill that? Do you see that regularly?
I see it changing. I do. So I think there is still a lot of learning to do and a lot of growth to still to happen. But we are starting to see schools and parents and everyone starting to see that there's more to just, like you said, that fixed mindset of they are what they are, or more than just you have to just be punishing them all the time. We're starting to see that, you know, we've got to look at brain development. We've got to look at emotion. Emotions are important. We need to look at accepting those, helping them through. There's definitely a shift. I don't think we're quite there yet, but we're getting there.
That's good that you've noticed that there is a shift with that. It's something that I think I kind of come across quite regularly, I think, in terms of sometimes with parents where some are probably just that sort of, the mindsets just need to be changed in a way like that things can improve rather than just saying like it's a lost cause, I feel. And what I wanted to delve into really was is about, in this country, we are just at the back end now. Well, we are at the back end of restrictions of COVID and stuff like that, where we don't have the restrictions in terms of face coverings now and stuff like that in schools. And it's I think from the top of my head, it's about 2 years to this week, in fact. So it's been such a long time. And I want to ask you, in terms of, how do you feel COVID has had a psychological effect on children?
Oh, look, that's a big question. Look, it's impacted children of all ages. So you've got the little kids where they don't know anything else, but it was so disruptive. There's so much anxiety, and kids feed off, the emotions of their parents and that around them. So anxiety levels are absolutely through the roof across the board. I think schools being open and home learning and those sort of disruptions has triggered a lot of anxiety as well, because they were anxious about being at school. Then they were anxious about going back to school. Look, it's definitely had an impact. Having said that, it doesn't mean that this is a lifelong trauma that they won't recover from. I mean, we can work through this and they will be okay. But it's acknowledging that, this is a trauma. This is something that they've been through. This is an anxiety-provoking experience, and we have to walk through it together, because I think a lot of parents are very anxious too, so it's hard.
It has been very hard, I must admit, like seeing children particularly, obviously having setbacks of times where they're spending large periods at home, then they've gone back into education. Particularly last year was a difficult one, where they'd gone back into education for several months, and then by January again, the restrictions came in the UK, so there was about a 3-month period again. So it just kind of, that constant changing and stuff like that, particularly with the children we work with in our setting, they need that routine. So obviously that routine being taken away had such a difficult sort of unsettling sort of thing. Like you say, that creates that anxiety and stuff. So it's been a very challenging period where it's, there's still the after effects, I feel like, for children, are certainly such. And you touched on there about anxiety. What sort of things would you suggest to parents to help children if they still suffer with them anxieties, or even parents themselves? What could they do to help their own anxieties?
Look, I think you've got to be realistic about it and not just sweep it under the carpet. You'll be all right. It's fine. Okay, so you're feeling anxious. Let's talk about it, okay? So I'm feeling a bit anxious at the moment too, because there's so much going on and it's hard to work out what to do. But then sort of make a plan together. Acknowledge what they're feeling. If there's something you can do to help them feel, so what would you need to feel okay to go to school? Could we do, and practice even doing some relaxation and some breathing exercises. So important for kids to learn that at a young age. And then make a plan. What can we do? Okay, so this we can't control. We can't control what's happening with COVID at the moment, and they keep changing the rules, and that's really, really hard. But what can we control? Okay, we can control what I do. We can control what we go, who you're going to see, what you're going to do. That's the part of our world that we'll look after. The other thing is that I think parents forget too, is that they need to turn the news off. Like the news is really scary. And parents put it on as just mindlessly have it on in the background. And that's really terrifying for children a lot of the time. There is so much going on, especially now there's wars going on and all of that. Just really don't have it on around the kids. They don't need that. They hear enough. They'll know enough. You can give them your version and your, acceptable level for their age. They don't need to see and hear what's going on in the world through those eyes.
You touched on there something that really interested me in terms of controlling the controllables. Now, I'm quite a person that likes to read Stoicism and stuff, and I quite like the thoughts of being able to pass on to children about controlling the controllables, but I find it quite a difficult way maybe explaining that to a child. So how would you go about that to try and maybe just pass that information on to them? Like, to what activities or exercises would you do with them?
Look, it depends what is actually going on with the child. But, I mean, if they're really anxious, like in a really anxious state, first thing we do is you have to calm first. And you have to calm, so you can do that by just being together and breathing slowly together. You can do little, breathing exercises where you breathe in and then breathe out using your fingers. Really, really important. Do controlled breathing to bring that calm to the body so they can think clearly, and then you problem solve that together. So that's where you go to, what do you have control over? What's happening in the moment? What can we do now? What can we do next? It's difficult to explain because I don't, with a specific example, I guess would be a bit easier. But yeah, just being present in that moment and actually thinking about what is going on now and what do I have control over, and letting go of the things that you don't have control over. Well, I can't control whether they change the rules with school or anything like that, but what I can control over is me here right now and what I'm doing at the moment.
Yeah, I find that that's a situation, say if there's a conflict at schools and stuff like that, and I have to explain to maybe a child that I can't control the other child's reaction to something you might say, or I can't control maybe an adult's instruction or something that they may disagree with. Like, I have to explain that to children that there's no way I can only you can only control what you can, and I can only control what I can. And I guess in that circumstance with COVID, that was the same, where we could only do what was said in terms of restrictions or following the right thing and putting that in place. So it is a very difficult thing for children at such a young age to have to deal with that. And like I said, the anxiety levels, and they're going to have such worries in the future after something like this, rather than being present and trying to return them to that sort of frame of mind.
Yeah, but I think also, like what you're saying there, I mean, they're going through something that's really huge, and you're right, kids need predictability. They need to know what's going on. It's hard for them to see from what you were saying, what someone else's reaction would be, and they don't get that until they're about 5, 6, 7 years of age before they can understand someone else's perspective. So seeing things outside their world is quite difficult. But having said that, if we can walk them through this time of anxiety, of going, okay, but this is where we're at, keep bringing them back to, this is what we can do. How are you feeling? Connecting to their body. Okay, do you need to do some breathing? What can we do? If we can teach them those skills now, then they're actually going to be more advanced than what we were, because they've overcome and gone through something so easy as this world has become.
You have some really great resources on your website in terms of your resource cards, and also you have a puzzle which is reflected in mindfulness and gratitude. Can you just explain to the sort of people that'll be listening or watching this in terms of what your resources are? Like, what can they either purchase or what they could, do at home with their children?
Sure. So the gratitude cards, I've got some here. So I made those because we know that practicing gratitude and particularly learn that as a child is so helpful at reducing anxiety and depression and other mental health issues as adults. So we learn to actually look at the things that are going on and be grateful for what we have and what is around us. It changes your thinking to being a more positive kind of way of thinking, which is obviously going to be more helpful. But whenever I do gratitude with kids, including my own kids, as you say, you know, what are you grateful for? They'll go food, house, family, friends, and that's about it. And it gets, and if you try to, you know, people try and do a routine of gratitude where they ask questions at the dinner table at bedtime, and you get stuck after a while. So I made the cards to give lots of different ideas, to give lots of different prompts of all the things that we can be grateful for. So not just those kind of things, but what are some things that you've overcome? What are some of your favourite memories? What are things in nature? What are some things that make you feel good? Like just expanding their thinking a bit. And then I added some mindfulness activities that you could use the cards for as well. And then the puzzle, that came out of an activity that I used to just do with kids where it combines sort of a mindfulness relaxation activity with so you connect your senses with the breathing. So we'd imagine their favourite place. So the puzzle that I've got, it's got little discs with different, like the beach, and it's got the river, and it's got friends and family, and you can put those in the middle of the hand. And so they imagine that place, and then they go through their 5 senses as they breathe in and breathe out. So they're connecting their breathing to also connecting to their senses. So another mindfulness activity. So there's that, and then there's my book, which is a really effective technique that I used for so long, teaching children how to change the ending of their dreams. So just imagining that dreams are movies in your head and you're the director and you get to change the dreams. So what actually happened with the book is that I wrote it, and then I found Dr. Justin Havens, who's in the UK. He has done his PhD on what he calls his dream completion technique, and he does it with mainly like people with post-traumatic stress disorder. And I showed him the book, and he said this is basically the same thing, which he did his PhD and knows is really effective. And he wrote the foreword for the book as well. So all of those are available on my website, but the book is better for you guys to get from Amazon.
I'm going to put them in my show notes anyway, all the resources in terms of the links to everything for people to purchase and look them up anyway. One thing I just wanted to ask you there is about sort of meditation. Now, some of the children I work with, and I go to them about doing breath work or breathing. Yeah. And the first response to me, if I said breathing, it doesn't work. That is the first thing they say to me. They say, it doesn't work, they don't want to do it. How do you convince a child to do breath work and set the following steps? Because for me, I can get a few children that'll buy into it through maybe a yoga practice or something like that. Yeah. But to just tell them to stop and breathe is a challenge in itself.
You've got to be careful. So if you tell them to stop and breathe when they're already escalated, it's not going to. They're not going to want to do it because they can't think clearly enough to be able to do it. So it's important that you're getting them to practice it when they can't, so that when they need to do it, it's easy. So I always suggest that they practice doing breathing at night time when they go to bed, because it puts them to sleep anyway. So they get used to doing it. So then it's not such a chore to do it. The other thing is you've got to find one that they like. So there's lots of different breathing activities, and you've got to find one that they're happy with. So like the finger one, I really like the finger one because a lot of kids like the feeling while they're doing it, and it helps them slow it down. But there's hot chocolate breathing where you pretend that you've got a hot chocolate and you're smelling the hot chocolate and then you're blowing to cool it down. There's finger breathing, there's box breathing, there's star breathing, there's all sorts of ones. You've got to find one that they are happy to do. The other thing is that I kind of say to them, look, if I go, doesn't work, well, and I get them to think, well, why didn't that work? And then they go, because you didn't do it long enough. You did it too quickly, and get them to kind of see, well, if you want it to work, you've got to do it for long enough. I will also usually take with kids, say, about 7 or 8 and up, I'll draw a picture of a body and I'll go through all the physical changes in their body when they're getting, say, really angry or anxious. And we go through, the muscles get tight, their breathing gets quick, they might feel like they want to punch someone, they might feel like they want to run. And we draw all that on a body. And then I'll explain to them that when we change our breathing, it actually changes the message that's coming to our brain telling us that everything's okay. And then we go through the body and show that that message has got to go right around the whole body before they feel calm again. So they understand that just doing a doesn't work. They've got to do it long enough for that message to go from their brain right down to their toes and then back up again for it to actually work. And the other thing is I would suggest is if they have music, which they can only really do if they're at home, maybe not at school, but they have to do the breathing for at least 2 songs. So that way they know that they're doing it for long enough.
I'm definitely going to give this a go, I think, from what you've told me there, because I'm in a position where I can use music at times and stuff like that as an intervention. So for me, that'd be really interesting. It's a different way of looking at it. Obviously, I've come across the hand, like the scanning of the hand and box breathing and stuff like that. But the one in terms of your body and stuff is something that I will take from this and certainly look at using. You mentioned there about breathing before bed. Now, I've recently become a sleep practitioner and working with children regarding sleep and coming across quite some scary things in a way, like the amount of hours children are sleeping. I don't know if this could be down to the fact that they have either awaiting or have been diagnosed with ADHD or autism or other sort of different things on the spectrum. And obviously it's affecting they're struggling to just basically go down to sleep. And you mentioned like there about breathing. So I know that all children might be able to do the breathing and go to sleep. What other things have you come across in your work like that where, obviously you've wrote your book about the sleep director. What things could you do in terms of your psychology to help children basically just sleep is the main thing?
Sleep is hard, isn't it? Okay. Well, the first thing that I always look at is what is their bedtime routine, and I'm sure you know. So if they're on a screen for hours before bed, that's going to make it harder to sleep. So they need at least an hour before bed without a screen. They need to have one.
Sorry, can I ask about I know about the screens. There's issues as well where people have them in the bedroom with children. What are your thoughts on that as well? Would you just... No, I don't like it either. I don't like it, no.
No. Look, we know that looking at a screen, not just the blue light, but the stimulation is going to keep you awake. It's just, there's so much research about that. So the idea, so many parents have TVs or they problems with sleep, with them being able to help put themselves to sleep. It affects melatonin production in their bodies. Like it's just an hour before bed, please, no screens. Try and have some other things for them to do, some real wind down activities. Like that is the first thing, and that's not going to work for everybody because, like you said, for kids with ADHD or other issues, autism, they can just really struggle with sleep. But for the majority of kids, that's the first step, is making sure they've got a really great sleep routine. It's about the same time every night. It's the same sort of routine we can have some variations, but basically the same rhythm before bed. And then if there's issues, then we look at what the issues might be. So it could be for a child who's really anxious. And when they start to go to sleep, it's quiet. So, I mean, we as adults know that when it's quiet, that's when the brain starts getting louder because everything that's happened through the day. So for those kids, I would, there's a few things, like if they're old enough, I'd suggest having a diary or a journal next to their bed so they can write their thoughts down. Because if you don't get them out, they're worried they'll forget them. So they need to get them out somehow. So that's why you've often got kids coming out 20 times to tell you something, because they can't wait till tomorrow. So either have a journal where they can write them or they can draw a picture of it. But if you can say, okay, that's where it goes and we'll look at it tomorrow, and actually have a time set for when you look at it so it's not just forgotten. Should
parents do that with them?
Yeah.
Because I just feel like some children, if you were to leave them to do it on themselves, they're just not going to use it in terms of, building that habit.
Well, it depends. It depends. Look, I do it with them to start off with, but if they see that it works and it's helpful, they're going to do it. It depends on the age of the child as well, and their abilities to be able to do that. Sometimes kids coming out and not being able to sleep becomes almost like a habit, and they feel like they have to do that to be able to come out. So I might even draw up some passes with they're allowed to come out so many times, but then after that they're going to need to stay in. That's for if there's anxiety. But the best thing that you're going to be able to do, and I don't care whether it's sleep problems, whether it's behavioural problems, whether it's anxiety, whatever it is, you need to talk to your child and try and work out what's going on. Why are you finding this hard? I understand that you're finding it really hard to sleep. What's going on? What could we do? Is there anything we can do to help? And I know parents do try this and they feel like they're pulling their hair out sometimes because they can't find what's going on. But you need a child involved in the process so that they are on board with helping bring the change.
I totally agree. I think that's one of the biggest things I've noticed so far since I've started is like parents don't seem to have an issue with the children sleeping as much, but it's the constant amount of settling sort of that the child are getting up through before they finally going to sleep because of all, like you said, this anxiety of these things that they seem to have to tell them because it's obviously going through their mind. And you've wrote that book in terms of sleep director. So what would you suggest to a child in that sort of process in bed? What should they be thinking? Instead, like obviously after they've wrote out their sort of thoughts on a gratitude sort of basis, then what would you suggest to a child to help them sleep? Is it the breathing? Would it be any other techniques?
Breathing's always good. That's going to help calm. You can try some relaxation or some meditation and some music. Like my book is to help with nightmares. So if it is because they're afraid of nightmares, the book goes through how you can change the dream into something funny. So if they're worried about a monster, well then how can we make that funny? Can we turn him into a marshmallow and eat him? Could we, if you're worried about, I'm trying to think of what some of the ones in there are like there was a bat and turned it into a butterfly that dropped lollies. As long as if you can make it funny, so farting things away is really good. Kids love that. Anything like that can make it funny and change their thinking, not take the dream away. So we don't do let's not think about it. No, we need to change it so that it's not so scary, and then they can go back to sleep.
What I wanted to just change this sort of direction of the conversation is about, so I became a father last year. My daughter's now 9 months, and I kind of came across a very important thing the other day in terms of milestones for babies, children, all sort of thing. It's the abbreviation is CDC in America, and from what I gather, nothing had changed in terms of their milestones or anything like that since 2004. And there's been quite a bit of an outrage at the moment, particularly in the parent sort of sector, in terms of milestones. Babies crawling is no longer a milestone, and that walking and talking, instead of being a milestone at 12 months, is now being pushed back. I don't know I can't say the word. I don't know specifically what the walking and talking's been pushed back to. I can't remember if it was 15 or 18 months. What are your thoughts on that in terms of, one, crawling being removed altogether, and two, walking and talking being pushed back? Is that something that's a sort of... I'm trying to explain, just like, is that seen as something that is a negative in a way that's been pushed back, or do you think it's a positive thing?
Yeah, so to explain a little bit, so what they've done is that we usually would look at milestones as an average of the 50% of the population. So 50% of kids would have been walking by about 12 months or whatever it used to be. So they've now changed that. Instead of looking at 50%, they've now to 75%. So their reasoning behind that is that instead of being 50% of the kids that aren't meeting the milestones, and we usually would say, well, we'll just wait and see for a little bit longer, they're now saying, well, we've actually changed that benchmark so that we're picking up the 25% that definitely aren't meeting that milestone. So I don't have a major issue with that. I don't know that it's necessary. And I actually do autism assessments. So the changes to developmental milestones are quite significant. When I'm doing an assessment, I kind of need to know whether things are in a delayed or not, particularly with speech and language. But what they've only really just changed where we're looking at those kids. So instead of just looking at, 50% meet by that stage, we're looking at more, where 75% of the kids meet that stage, so that we're picking up those 25%. Having said that, I do have an issue with them not recognising crawling as a milestone. I think that's actually a really important milestone in development. I know plenty of occupational therapists that will argue that that's actually very important in terms of coordination and development, and kids that don't crawl, they end up having to do exercises with them to help build those skills that they didn't get when they were little. So, yeah, I do have an issue with that one. The changing of the boundaries I don't think it was all that necessary, but I kind of get why they did it.
It just surprised me, particularly, obviously, having sort of... for when we have our, like... I'm trying to think of the word. The lady that comes... There's like a lady that comes, obviously, to see my daughter and my girlfriend in terms of milestones. So obviously we had to, for 8 months, we had to checklist, obviously, stuff like that, and crawling being one. And at the time, she still isn't able to crawl, but she's not far off. She's literally at that sort of stage where she could be there. But in terms of like ticking them milestones, and that was just for 8 months in this country. You know, it seems quite a lot of like... It seems so different to have in one country have this expectation of you could be crawling at 8 months in this country, yet now in America it's like it's not. It doesn't matter anymore. It's such
we don't even care.
Is that down to maybe parenting in a sense? Like, is that where they feel like that it's not pushed as much than maybe what it was, say, 10 years ago? Or is it, I don't know what would make them feel like that change, or is it just that it's maybe more easier from an assessment point of view in terms of meeting that sort of, like you say, like if you're going to go and see someone in terms of an autism assessment, then obviously it's easy. It gives them more time to get up to that stage rather than pushing it in terms of making parent feel under pressure and all them sort of things. Because it's not great for a parent to feel like, oh, well, if my child's not hit that milestone, then you're going to feel like you're failing them in a sense. And that's an awful feeling for a parent to hold on to.
Yeah. And for the majority of those kids, even though they would have been on the end of the milestone or maybe they were a little bit delayed, they do get there. So I think that's why they've stretched it out that bit more, because most kids are still normally developed. They might just be a little bit later in some of those things. So I guess in that sense, to relieve parents a little bit, it's probably not a bad thing.
I'm just going to keep an eye on it because I think it's just very interesting in terms of what people have been saying and stuff like that. Like, obviously, it's a concern to some in the professional industry and obviously a concern to parents. So it'd be interesting to see if they backflip it or if they just carry on as it is. And I just wanted to ask about, you also write a blog. I noticed that you're very consistent in terms of that. And one of the blogs kind of caught my eye. And it was your blog in terms of saying that it was never too early to prepare kids for social media. And obviously, one of the things, again, another thing, sort of a guidance came out, I think it's last year, off the top of my head. It might be this year even, which was from the World Health Organization, which influenced me a little bit because it was like suggesting that my daughter should not be watching TV, should not be on screens or anything like that till the age of 2. You know, what are your thoughts on that? Like, from a personal point of view, it just seems such a strange decision to implement that, because I get the sense that there's a little bit here going down the ADHD route, and there's a little bit of something going down the route of physical sort of, we don't want children to become obese so early.
Yeah. There's kind of two different questions there. So in terms of screen time with children, that is the recommendation, is none before 2. I don't know that there's too many parents that actually followed that. And I don't think it's the end of the world if you haven't.
I'll be honest.
But yes, it does.
Sorry, I'll go butt in. I'm just going to say, my daughter does... When sometimes if she's in her bounce or something, we do have TV on for her, and she loves watching TV, bouncing away to it. I don't know how we'd feel if we just let her bounce in a bouncer and just looking at myself and my girlfriend. Like, what sort of stimulus is that for her? She's only going to get bored after. I don't know. It just seems a bit. It seems difficult one to put myself in terms of, do you carry on doing that or do you go follow like the guidance?
Look, there is research to say that too much screen time before the age of 2 or even 3 is not great for brain development. So, you wouldn't do it. It's not like you would sit them in front of it for hours on end, or that you would, I think my concern is when parents get a little bit too reliant on it, because it gives us a break, and I do get that. And I have used it. It's not like I don't put my kids in front of screens. Yes, they do. But if we get too reliant on it, or we just, they're just much easier if we let them do that, that's a concern, because too much screen time in that sense, it is overstimulating. Now, I know they're sitting there quietly, but their brain isn't quiet. That's actually, it's in hyper mode going, because there's so much information, there's so much, light stimulation. It's actually quite a lot. So for that part of the question, absolutely minimize screen time. But, we're human. Realistically, it's not going to happen all the time. And as much as I wanted to not have my kids watch screens until they were 2, I guarantee they did. But I hopefully minimised it a bit, and I still do. So my kids, 6, 10 and 12, and they have set screen time, how much time, and it's more lenient on weekends, and there's a certain time that screens are allowed on, that kind of thing. So they are aware there's good screen time and there's bad screen time. Good screen time is when it's a bit more creative. They can watch, like my son plays the drums, so he watches YouTube videos on how to play the drums of different songs. That's good screen time. Just mindlessly watching something, like just stupid YouTube videos that just go on, that's different. So, I'd try and educate them on how that actually affects their brain, what's good, what's bad, what's okay, what's not. So that's the screen time part of it. The social media, so the blog that I wrote is more on social media, because what I was finding is that I work with kids that are 5 years old, and they're doing TikTok videos with and without their parents' consent.
That's scary, that.
This is not okay. Very scary. And this is what worries me, is that schools are implementing education about social media, but they do it in year 6, just before they go to high school. Well, that's too late, because by that stage they've already been exposed to social media. They may not have it themselves, even parents that are strict and don't let them have it, but they're exposed to it by friends, for the other people they know that it's around. They know what it is. They've jumped on. They've looked things up themselves. They need to be educated from a really early age of what's okay on the internet, what's okay with social media, and what's not. And I think social media was used a lot during lockdowns and things like that, and it could be really positive. But they need to be aware that, just the same as we teach them road rules, they need to know rules around the internet and social media.
What are your thoughts in terms of, so now obviously children in terms of ADHD are 1 in 10 diagnosed now. Do you see a correlation to screen time and social sort of being on phones, devices, stuff like that? Do you think that is a direct cause of ADHD today? Like there's obviously there's adults as well where they seem to be getting diagnosed now ADHD, and is that a correlation to that, do you feel, or do you think that's, I don't know, is that a stimulant for it?
Look, I can't say that it's the only cause. I think it's a bit more complicated than that. I do think there is a connection. There's definitely been enough research to show that there's a connection. It doesn't mean that screen time necessarily caused ADHD. Possibly they were predisposed to it and already had signs of it, and then more screen time actually made the symptoms worse. That's very possible. Because like I was saying, when we're watching, especially if they're doing like video games and things like that are really high intense stimulation, what it does is it stimulates the part of the brain that's fight flight, that's constantly moving, which is very much like what it is like to live with ADHD as well.
What I would like to do now, Christine, is that I would like to finish with 3 final questions. Normally I do 2, but with my time off, I've been able to thought of a 3rd question. So my first question for you is, what keeps you to stay humble?
My children. So, they're very good at bringing it back down to earth. So when you think you've got things sorted out, they'll throw something in front of you that's put you through a spin.
And my next question to ask is, what does it mean to be human?
What does it mean to be human? Wow, Look, I think to be human is to see beyond yourself and to have empathy and understanding for others around you as well, and not just focused on yourself and your own survival, but considering others around you.
I like that answer. And finally, so watching a children's program or film, I watched Coco the other week, and it made me think about being in the land of the living and the land of the dead, and particularly those in the land of the dead were only in there because of people that remembered them. So I'd like to ask you, how would you like to be remembered? I know it's quite a morbid question, but how would you like to be remembered after?
I would like to be remembered by my children. I'd like to be remembered as someone that was always there for them and that had fun with them, and that they could ask anything. Everyone else, I don't know. It's only really my kids and my husband that I'm worried about how they remember me.
Well, Krysten Taprell, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Where can people get your website, your resources, everything that you've put to, where can they go?
So my website is that all my resources are on there. My book is available on Amazon. That's the cheapest way for you guys because the postage from Australia is huge. And otherwise, Facebook and Instagram is just The Therapist Parent.
No, honestly, thank you very much for your time. Obviously, it's been quite interesting trying to get our times in terms of like myself being at 9 o'clock in the UK in the morning, you're 8 o'clock at night. It's been obviously quite challenging to link this up. But honestly, what you've provided today, I think, is going to be so helpful for parents, so helpful for teachers, and anyone in education or psychologists. You know, some of the things you've really shared in this conversation have been great, and I'm looking forward to sort of releasing this for people to hear and stuff like that. So I really thank you for giving me your time and everything, and I hope all in the future goes well for you too.
Thank you. No, it's been great.
Thank you for staying humble.